Hello there, I'm Sokovin, and welcome to the MTG Raw Talk podcast, the show where myself and my co-host, Prince of Asphodel, talk about cEDH, the optimized side of everyone's favorite Magic the Gathering format. No edits, no cuts, just our raw opinions as two experienced players. If you would take a moment to click that like button and subscribe for further content, we would greatly appreciate it. And with that, let's hear it. And we're live. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I've got another guest from the Court of Asphodel here. Kill, welcome.
Hello.
And as usual, I've got Prince.
Hey, what up?
So we got a couple of things to talk about today because Magic World is not really spinning as fast as it usually does this week. So we're going to start with something in cEDH that seems to be happening. More and more, we see Turbo Nas strategies take the top spots in tournament play and just represent the meta as a whole and push strategies out. One of the strategies that's being pushed out, in my opinion, is the entire strategy of stacks is becoming less and less viable.
I also share that opinion. It is very unreliable at the moment, and it feels bad to play.
Yeah, I've tried several attempts at building stacks lists, but I always come back to my own fast combo because I feel like that's what I have to do to compete.
I'm exactly the same way. Numerous times I've begun building just random stacks, and along the way, I'm just like, I could just make this into an Ad Nauseam deck and be more consistent. I'll have cards like Rule of Law and the blue Rule of Law Arcane Laboratory in my deck. I'm like, this could just be a cantrip or another very cheap mana rock. There are times I've just cut everything except for Deafening Silence out of my deck and just replaced with like 1-drop mana rocks or just random good creatures like the new 1-drop black creature that's just Lay on the Void for creatures. I feel like the only consistently good stacks pieces right now are Deafening Silence because it's a 1-mana card, Lavinia because she's 2 mana, Get Out Teague also because he's 2 mana. Essentially, it feels like if a stacks piece is not mana value 2 or less, it's not playable.
Yeah, I for one know that I've not decided to play Blood Moon in many games I've played recently because when I think about it, it's just not good enough.
It's not. There's so much artifact ramp that Blood Moon, oh, you've turned all my non-basics into mountains? That's fine. I have 3 mana dorks out already, 3 mana rocks. I don't care. So Blood Moon, unless you're playing a mono red deck or a 2-color deck, usually ends up hurting you worse or doing nothing at all. It's just a waste of a slot.
Mm-hmm. Prince, I remember you talking about your Timna Thrasios with more of these 2 mana or less stacks pieces that hurt other turbo strategies. Have you quickly considered cutting any of those, or have you gotten any reps in with it yet?
No, unfortunately, I haven't really had any playtime as of late, but just in terms of constructing a deck like that, there so much effort has to go into coming up with stacks pieces that won't hurt your own ability to win, which is always what I think stacks decks have had a problem with, is that they need to bend over backwards to find win conditions that aren't stopped by the best stacks pieces that they want to be running. And
Yes.
at the end of the day, it just ends up, you take a step forward, but you end up taking 2 steps back, and it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, you'll find yourself being like, oh, Blind Obedience is cool and all, but like it's not doing much, it's hurting me, I can't combo out now that it's on the field. Well, no, you can combo through Blind Obedience. I guess Deafening Silence. You can't combo out while that's on the field, so winds up you have to remove it. And a lot of times I'll look at Arcane Laboratory and be like, man, I just wish this was a bounce spell. I wish this was Chain of Vapor or Cyclonic Rift.
Yeah, and all this has given when the stack decks really want to be a stack deck. that soon gave the rise to win-conless stacks decks. Playing with Power and Play to Win have been showcasing various win-conless stacks decks. Like, you've got Timnatana, you've got Akromatana, you've got Kamal Ishai, you've got Tavishzet Tana decks.
So the concept there is to simply not have a combo and just win with commander damage? I'm assuming?
Yeah, combat damage or commander damage, just beat him to death. You don't have any win cons. Your goal is to make it so no one else can win the game, and you will win by default because your board state's better.
I think I unintentionally have a deck like that. I believe I played it against you a few times. It's my Faro deck, where there's no actual win con other than turning creatures sideways, and it just plays control and stacks pieces. And I've considered many times just switching out for Lavinia just to be more effective. I feel like a lot of times, though, if you were to play that deck, like when I play my Faro deck, it just unintentionally drags the game out drags out what could be a 30-minute game out to upwards to 2 hours, and a lot of people just don't like playing that kind of deck, and that's kind of like the sacrifice you have to make if you're going to force stacks. Is just going to be no fun for everyone, including yourself.
Yeah, so you have to have a particular goal to approach a game with stacks like that, especially. In terms of my creations, I've been sort of disillusioned with Klothys recently, because I just feel like every time I play a Blood Moon or a Null Rod, it doesn't do enough, especially if it doesn't come out on turn 1 or 2.
I've also noticed that the past few times where I've played against you and you've played Collector Oof, and you know, our local combo player just plays right through it. It's like, oh, Collector Oof, I'll just remove it.
Yeah.
So you wind up having to burn resources to protect things like Collector Oof or No Rod, and then it's like, I burnt a resource to protect the Oof, but someone else is going to remove that Oof and combo off, and now I don't have a way to stop that. It's just, the entire format of cEDH at the moment is, well, the entire game has always been a race to see who can win the fastest for the most part, but cEDH in particular is simply about who wins quickest. You'll have one player burn the resources stopping a win, then another player will just commence to win. I feel like in the past, Stacks was there, and it could just stop that, but the format is just simply too fast and consistent for that. We've had new cards come out, such as Dockside Extortionist, powerful free spells such as Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship. The most egregious card in recent history, in my opinion, Underworld Breach. These cards are very low cost, extremely quick, and exceptionally powerful. Particularly, in my opinion, Deflecting Swat, which I would actually take over Fierce Guardianship if given the option.
Yeah, Deflecting SWAT is an incredible card. I've used that in various strange ways. Remember when you and I went over to a game store and someone was playing Jessica Dargo?
Oh, yes.
And they were like, okay, play a really big Jessica minus. And I was like, Deflecting SWAT? Actually, I win the game?
Yes, and that is one of the reasons why I've believed Deflecting SWAT is just better, because it is a counter spell, and it is a counter removal spell, counter player kill spell. You can even take targeted extra turns. It is just so much better than Fierce Guardianship, in my opinion.
Yeah, Peer into the Abyss as well.
For whatever reason, people still don't expect the SWAT. They'll be expecting the Guardianship when they see a blue commander, but they just don't expect the SWAT.
Yeah, Prince, do you need to explain how the SWAT made me win the game when someone tried to win with Dargo Jessica?
No, I can imagine multiple ways.
Yeah, just because, so they play Dargo as many times as they like with their combo, and then they play Jessica and they minus. It's an ability that has targets, so I use Deflecting SWAT to change the targets, so I target the 3 other players other than myself as the 3 targets of Jessica's ability, and so then I win the game, which was really strange. The guy was so happy with himself that he comboed off, and then he was dejected that
I
one
He
card beat him.
remembered his combo wasn't Ad Nauseam. He was sad.
Yeah.
Yes, Ad Nauseam would have protected him from that combo because he likely would have just drawn a free counterspell or a low mana counterspell.
Yeah, let's talk about that. How Ad Nauseam is not just a strong win condition for combo, but it's also its own protection. You need to resolve it, and that's all you need to do.
Yes, a majority of the time when I see someone resolve Ad Nauseam, it's land, mana rock, counterspell, combo piece. It is just too good at everything. When you can draw upwards to 10 to 15 cards at instant speed at any point in the game, your card is too strong, and it needs to go, in my opinion. I'm sorry for the investors.
Actually, strangely, I think nobody's investing in Ad Nauseam. The card has never been expensive.
That is interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, I believe that card has always been under $20.
I don't think cEDH could spike any price of a card that's not on the reserve list, honestly. We're too small.
Yeah, fair point. Well, Dockside. But Dockside's attractive to casual players, which is something
It's
that
still good in
Ad
casual.
Nauseam is not. Ad Nauseam is actively bad in casual.
Dockside is exceptionally strong, but there are many times in casual games where I've seen Dockside whiff pretty heavily. cEDH games, well, in our pod, he actually doesn't do that well, but I assume in other pods, Dockside is still the blowout that he should be. And I do believe Dockside is far too strong and was a mistake at 2 mana.
Yeah, I think your data is skewed because I never play with heavy artifacts. So there's always that one player who's not on the rock plan, and so you don't get those free treasures off of me. And half the time I have a null rod in play anyway.
Yes, Dockside is like the primary reason why Kenrith actually became a deck over Timnut and Dracios, who were, and probably still are, considered the boogeyman of the cEDH format. Dockside just allowed Kenrith to finally edge a little bit up there and get up close. I mean, there's so many things you can do in a 5-color deck that's just running Dockside. Get your horse out, flicker your horse, do weird reanimation lines, bounce lines involving Baron, Master Wizard, a card that saw no play in cEDH, but now has entire combo lines dedicated to him. But also far too strong, and I would not be sad to see it go. And I am not of the opinion that we need to ban everything. I'm of the opinion that there should be 2 ban lists for the 2 formats.
Yeah, that brings us to our second topic, discussing whether or not cEDH, well actually, I think all of us agree that cEDH should become its own format, with its own rules and ban lists and designations. And
Absolutely. Yes, there's just a completely different mindset between players who play to win as quickly and as efficiently as possible, between players bringing their Squirrel Tribal or Merfolk Tribal deck to game night. It's just, we need separate ban lists just so we can take care of some of the things that are plaguing the more competitive tiers of gameplay, such as Ad Nauseam and Thassa's Oracle and things like that.
yeah, because unless it's Flash, the RC will not take action.
Yes, and that is strange because I've played upwards of 6,000 games of just casual Commander, and I have never seen Flash, and I have no idea how Flash received a ban. Can any of you have never seen Flash ever, like, in a casual pod?
It received a ban because of cEDH. That was the one time.
Oh, so they listened to the cEDH players over that. Okay.
Yeah. That's why I say unless it's Flash, unless there is a community outcry loud enough and no casual player ever touches it, they won't consider banning it. Ad Nauseam, I'm sure at least some people play. And so the amount of casual players who want to play Ad Nauseam in their life gain deck is going to outweigh all of the cEDH players combined. Or at least that's how the RC views it. That the card itself is not causing problems for the majority of players, and so it's not worth banning.
That is, again, I just simply must be a bad Magic player, because I was always of the opinion Flash was good, but Flash gimped your deck building pretty heavily, and there were some times when Flash was just a detriment to your hand. You would have to shuffle away a good hand because it had cards in there you just did not want in there with the Flash.
Yeah, Prince, you know more about this than I do. Will you touch on once again why Flash was such a problem?
I was against the banning for a while, but I ended up not being super upset when it did end up happening. Yeah, it was essentially just the speed that didn't let you interact with it well. And that was what became the problem. Because if you could win, you could technically win on turn zero with it. That's what everyone cited. Not that it really happened regularly, of course, but when you have something that can win consistently on turn one or two, that by definition just means people don't always get a chance to interact with it. And I think that was the ugliness of it. Like even if a card that's so fast in the format that it consistently wins by turn three or two won't always be a problem because at least people will have one turn to prepare for it. But if you can just win the die roll and then just win before anyone else gets a turn, I think that's ugly enough for the committee to kind of turn its head toward us and be like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe you're right. That's not cool.
That's interesting because I would like to see. I mean, I guess it's far too late, but I would be interested to see the statistics on that, like how many players actually receive a turn zero or turn one win with Flash in the meta. Because when I was playing a Flash Holt deck, there were numerous times when I simply could not win because a Flash piece got exiled from my library, or someone dropped a Grave Hate early enough, or I simply had to go down so many cards because I kept getting parts of my Flash pile in my hand. Or the Flash was simply counter. I don't ever remember getting a consistent turn one win with Flash.
And it might be just the fact that Flash excelled at playing into the most powerful pods, and that players who knew very well how to mulligan constructed their deck to optimize the Flash line had a higher chance of obtaining those turn one wins with it. And it wasn't necessarily that they happened very often. It was more that the fact that they could happen ruined a lot of games that could have been otherwise interesting.
Oh.
I think that's what we'd really have to think about here, because we'd have to ask ourselves the question, well, how many turn one wins is low enough to where we don't mind it? Because when we went to our LGS here, which is just we play Commander every Friday, with 1 day a week, we got in, because we were efficient, like maybe 7 to 10 games, and even one of those ending on turn one just feels like, well, that was, maybe for us because we're of a more competitive mindset we would be like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But in our LGS, unfortunately, we were mixed in with the entire commander population. So sometimes someone that wasn't expecting it just showed up and then just did not play a game. And I could
Oh.
see that being uh, it's a factor that draws you away from the format, even if it doesn't happen that often, because it just sets a precedent that is not what you were expecting.
Well, that's the real issue right there. Is you had sounds like normal players sitting down with more competitive-minded players, and that is in particular why we do kind of need to kind of split the player base, as terrible as that sounds, because
It
there are some players who simply are not concerned with winning
it
at
doesn't
all.
sound terrible to me, because everyone and their mother has already talked about power levels, how you need to categorize your deck into these various stages so that you sit down and talk to people for like an hour before you play a game to make sure that everybody's going to be happy, everybody's going to be going towards the same goals, having the same kind of fun, and winning the game in the same speed. All of that would be solved in most cases because most problem games are caused by a very great imbalance of power level, if you can even call it that. And splitting the format into a competitive one and a not competitive one would be both simple and good for the health of the format. Because when you think about it, how was EDH created? Some high level judges sat down and they wanted to play with cards that weren't seeing competitive play. They wanted to play slower games where they didn't need to run around giving judge calls. And so they sat down with their Elder Dragons and built decks in a very creative system that has endured the test of time. And who's saying that competitive players can't rally together, form their own committee, create their own ban list, and officiate cEDH as its own format? Because we don't need Wizards' permission to do this.
Oh, absolutely. We don't need anyone's permission to do it. We just need a large enough number of people who are down for it and a voice. And yeah, it would be pretty healthy for just the general normal commander format in general, because you'll see a lot of players sit down and they made like efficient, strong decks, not quite cEDH tier, but they sit down and they just want to win, and that is their objective, and they just feel kind of hated out because they sit down with a group who just don't have that mindset. So they just get kind of pushed out of the format in general because they don't really have anywhere to go because they want to make their really strong combo deck.
Yeah, if you listen to the last episode, the Multanis of the world, decks that will always win at a casual table, but struggle to get there in cEDH, you can finally play down with people who will at least give you a challenge and not get mad at you if you win.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, splitting the format, having a cEDH format, a competitive-minded format, and just everything else, I think that would be perfect, and would just end power level and talks in general for thinking about competitive play, especially if you would have your own separate like ban list. And most of the cards that would be banned in a cEDH format probably weren't seeing much play in normal Commander in general. But as you said, you very rarely see Ad Nauseam outside of cEDH.
Yeah, and we talked about in our last episode how you could theoretically see that Ad Nauseam could start to see play if someone, say they're playing a Loro, they have this excess of life, and they see this card that can draw multiple cards, and it's an instant, and they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. They either play it and they realize, oh, this sucks for my deck, or they start to play it and be like, huh, this is pretty good. I kind of want to play into this. And then it eventually becomes a problem. But that's far off in the future in terms of time scale. It doesn't happen as quickly as Hull Breacher happened, or as... Hull Breacher is the best example of that. Where it was an easily accessible card that it didn't tell you how to play it. It wasn't like, here, I have to be played in a super specific competitive way. It was like, hey, put me in your deck and I'll prevent your opponents from drawing cards and I'll give you mana. But it ended up with a lot of non-games under its belt.
That card is a prime example of mistake. It was far too powerful.
So, yeah, and I would personally trust a committee of some of the more influential cEDH people who have a lot of experience with the format to construct a band list for us, because the RC is very disconnected from us to begin with. So who else are we going to look to for this? Who else needs to talk about it before we actually start to split off?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think all you really need to do is just start a Reddit thread and get the conversation started, and there's enough people who have interest, then you can just put something together. And you could, start sending messages to those big name influencers like the Playing with Power guys and the Casually Competitive group.
Yeah, and we could do that. Before we go and make this Reddit thread, which I'm definitely considering doing, Prince, what do you think might be the downsides of splitting the format in two like that?
I'm actually completely against the split. I think our format will die if we do. I think we're functioning under an illusion that Commander can exist as a competitive format, and we're allowed to live in this illusion because casual exists. The moment that we try and make it a competitive-only format, and there are high-level tournaments, well, we've already seen this happening in the last more exclusive high-level tournament that is the most similar to something like a Pro Tour that we've ever seen. Basically, there are 3 decks that exist in this format, and that's it. And they're all mostly variations of themselves. Because the fact that it's a 4-player format actually ends up constricting the amount of variety that actually exists. And the only thing holding the pillars that sustain us, basically, is this illusion that we can actually play whatever we want, because the more people that buy into that, and of course I don't mean whatever we want, there's accepted deck lists, we have an entire database for that, but the more people that actually accept this, the more it becomes true. And that's what we see in the more Grand Prix-esque formats that just allow anyone who wants to play cEDH to come in, because there's such a diversity there that it actually hates out the ugly truth of the format, where if you had just one game to play, there be one correct archetype.
Yeah, I have a couple counterpoints to that, though. How do you think that the environment you describe will change if the format splits and we obtain our own ban list? Because we know that Modern and Legacy have been balanced before.
Yes, absolutely. Targeted bans have, in fact, increased like deck diversity in Modern and Legacy in the past, and I don't see why targeted bans would not do the same for cEDH. You would, of course, still have archetypes that come to the forefront, but the fact that you can have numerous different types of commanders and partners as the leader of your deck, but your deck is still an Ad Naus deck, still points to the main problem being Ad Naus. So if you were to remove that from the equation, what would you replace it with? Would it force? I'm of the opinion it would force diversity and force people to change out and actually play more towards their strength of the commander, and not just have it there because, oh, it's 4 colors and I'm running Ad Naus.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have evidence that points to one direction or another, because that doesn't really happen in our format so often. The only time that the top dog has really been taken down a peg was when Flash got banned, and Flash had oppressed Ad Nauseam out of the format. So once Flash got banned, Ad Nauseam just took over. So the logic could follow that if we ban Ad Nauseam, the next most oppressive thing would just rise to the top. We just don't really know what that is, so I'm not 100% sure that would happen.
It also wasn't an immediate rise to power after Flash got banned. The format was extremely diverse for several months before people started to creep up towards Ad Nauseam. And then it took some very new cards with very different power levels to push it beyond the realm of being okay. But that wasn't even my strongest counterpoint here. I think it would still be healthy because players like me exist. The reason that you and I split off to play cEDH over Modern in the first place was because we were tired. We were both tired of format shakeups all the time, and we wanted to play different games. We were tired of sitting down and playing 8 games of Burn or 8 games of Titan Shift. We wanted to play with cards that were different, have longer games with more people, and it was just more fun to play. And personally, I'm never going to pick up Ad Nauseam. Even if it's the objective best thing to do in the format, I'm not going to pick it up. And I'm not the only person who thinks this way. Even though we play cEDH, we're still Commander players.
And we also know exactly what the next best thing in the format would be, and that's Thoracle.
Yeah, Thoracle or
Thoracle is
Dramatic Reversal.
part of the Ad Nauseam package, so it was also part of the Flash package, but I almost don't even see it as its own archetype.
I think he's talking about Naked Thoracle, because then there wouldn't be a package.
Yeah, your package would essentially be trying to get to usually infinite mana or Thoracle as quickly as possible. Or Sakavan has put together interesting combos with, for instance, with Minsc, things like that nature. I believe an Ad Nauseam ban would force us more towards more diversity, as I stated. The only evidence I could point to that is, as you mentioned yourself, the Flash ban pushed the format towards Ad Nauseam, and we have evidence in the past of bans just shaking up the format of
And
Modern and Legacy.
it wouldn't just be one card either. It would be Ad Nauseam, maybe see what happens, or a short list of cards all at once, see where the format goes for several months, and then make several other decisions. When a format begins anew, the ban list gets changed more often than it would in later years. So I'm of the belief that we'll find a more balanced equilibrium if we can band together and organize something like this.
Yes, absolutely. And as I think we're in agreement, the format of cEDH or cEDH play right now is very much streamlined towards the very one strategy, and that strategy is the dominant strategy. And I feel like for competitive play, it shouldn't be one strategy. The idea behind competitive play for me is you have an idea of how you want to win, and you're going to get that win as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I feel like in our current format, it's just the only way you win is through this method. That method being Ad Nauseam into whatever the combo is.
So are we two for the split and 1 against the split tonight?
That is what it sounds like.
Or have we?
I can also see his point, though. I understand what he's saying, where he's coming from.
We haven't swayed you, Prince?
No, but it's an interesting conversation topic for sure.
What if I get a big name YouTuber to support me?
That'd be interesting too. I don't know many big name Magic YouTubers,
I don't either.
but
I know all of them. So
I don't regularly play Magic.
Reddit thread incoming. Okay, let's get out of this one and move on.
At the very least, if not even like a permanent change, but perhaps just an experiment.
Yeah, we could call it like Project X, like whatever word we choose to describe it.
Yes, just build your decks, remove Ad Nauseam, remove Thassa's Oracle, see where you go with that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I predict that something like that would show pretty positive results because that's what it does in any format. Like, if we think about the moments when a new standard set comes into rotation and the old ones come out, the immediate big tournaments after that are just blocked with diversity because everyone's trying to figure out what to do, but no one really knows about it. And I think that's what the cEDH format would look like.
And that's where we want to keep any format, is in that space. That's the healthiest state of any format, is when people don't know what's best.
Well, it's not going to remain that way if we move it toward a more competitive-minded format that actually allows for tournaments, is the problem. That's why Modern and Standard can't stay that way.
But
it would at the very least be more diverse than it currently is, where your top decks are just variations of the same deck.
It might be true just because of how uniquely oppressive Ad Nauseam is. I could accept that.
I also think that we're not counting the math here. In a 1v1 four copy 60 card format, formats are solvable. In a 4-player 100 card singleton format with commanders, I don't believe it's solvable if we have any more diversity after Ad Nauseam goes, for example. So I think that several months of diversity would result from each potential change, and maybe even more than I'm even considering.
And even with that solvability of those other formats, you still have tremendous diversity among the decks. In Modern, you have Burn, you have Tron, you have 3 different variations of Tron, I believe. You have, I can't remember anything else off the top of my head. I haven't played Modern for a while.
And like, I think
Affinity is still a thing? Affinity back?
Yeah, Affinity is back. Weirdly enough, with Colossus Hammer, but anyway.
Oh yeah, you have Hammer Time. That's a deck that's the Modern format is pretty diverse at the moment. Even with like a 4-card, 60-card format, you see these tremendous deck diversities. Even within the same deck archetype, you'll have diversity. And I think that's why I want high-level commander to be. Is you could have deck archetypes, and within the archetype, there's just diversity. It's not simply I slam in Lotus Petal, Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, fast mana, I add Nas, I draw all that, I combo off. And I feel like the main reason we have this narrow space is Ad Nauseam.
Y'all ready for a hot take?
Sure.
I wouldn't just ban Ad Nauseam. I think another thing that oppresses diversity is the partner mechanic.
Ooh, I think that's going to be a hard sell.
because if people can't just play with partner, then they have to find a commander. They can't just be like, I'm going to throw together the best 99 cards I can, and I already know who my commanders are going to be.
I think the particular issue with partner, which has been stated by many in the past, is there are a few partners that is league superior to other partners. The partners' power levels are just far too varied. I mean, why would you run anything over Tinma? Tinma is just too solid. You land her, you have dorks, you swing with your dorks, you draw cards. There's no reason to run. Who's our partner? Some 5-mana guy gives shit flying or something?
No, he's the guy who like brings creatures back. He's an enchantment. I forget his name.
Garbage. There's no reason to run that. Just the power level of the partners, too damn varied.
Yeah, I guess that's more of what I mean, is the powerful partners would also be on my short list to ban. Moving on to our next topic, another couple splits are happening. First one I want to talk about is throughout the pandemic or even before it, with the rise of Magic Arena and Wizards of the Coast focusing on marketing towards that, using all their money to fund tournaments for that, just having
exclusive arena cards.
Yeah, exclusive arena cards, arena mechanics, arena formats. It seems like paper Magic and online Magic are two entirely separate games now.
They assuredly are now, with exclusive mechanics such as Perpetual and Seek, and things that simply cannot be done easily in the real world. And from an economic standpoint, bravo to you, Wizards of the Coast. That is the future and the way to go. It is certainly a way to get your card game out to the billions of people in China and India.
Yeah, they really want to make it an esport.
Yeah, I don't hate them for that. I understand 100% where they're going because it is a business. It is just unfortunate that us people who are not quite that into Arena are getting kind of left to the wayside.
Yeah, we are, aren't we? Because not only do we have less and less marketing towards paper Magic, but there's no focus on in-person play. We don't really hear anything like that. There used to be a weekly podcast about Magic play, a Magic tournament play, and that just doesn't exist anymore from Wizards of the Coast. There used, I think it was called Monday Night Magic or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's along the lines. And all your there's just so many now people on Twitch and YouTube who just play through Arena because it's so simple. You don't need to have real cards or find real people to play with. And again, it's what WotC wants. That's why they send them codes and promos and things like that. It just gets their game out there.
And yeah, it is a different game, even scientifically, because in any card game, an important part of it is tells and the subconscious decisions of your opponent that you can pick up on in order to get an edge over them. And you can't look at your opponent's face when you're playing on Arena. What you can see is where their cursor is hovering, but they can use that to bluff. What you can see is the emotes they use, and those can be used to bluff. It causes I will give credit where credit is due. An online game gives you more hidden information. And so it's going to be harder to solve and harder to make stale if you're just playing on Arena. But for those of us that enjoy playing with real people sitting across from us or next to us in a space that makes us feel a certain way that we've grown up with, that is harder to come by now. And, the pandemic is a really big reason for that. But even before then, I know a lot of players who I played a lot of Magic with them, and then they just switched to Arena, and they never came to play paper Magic again.
Oh yes, it's so much simpler and accessible. And talking about the scientific differences, there's just a completely different sort of mind game in paper Magic. For instance, in paper Magic, it's a scumbag move, but you can get wins just off catching your opponent making mistakes. And I feel like that is actually an important aspect of playing the game, is simply knowing how to play the game and knowing when you can take advantage of your opponent's own flaws and mistakes, such as extra draws or playing things incorrectly. And there are some people who would greatly disagree, but I feel like that is an important aspect of professional play. For instance, in poker, if you were to make a mistake such as dropping your card face up or dropping a card down on the bottom of the floor, you would get disqualified. And I feel like that is an important part of the game, is just knowing how to play.
Yeah, it was less pushing buttons and more really focused. Whereas online, you're only allowed to make legal mistakes.
Yes, and online it does everything for you, so you'll never make a mistake accidentally moving through a different phase. And again, I think that just that high pressure of competitive Magic brings out the best, and it just brings out the best and most hyper moments in the game, is when people make mistakes, ironically, and everyone around them catches it. Or, for instance, when you have legendary cheaters finally get called out, although I guess you don't really want people cheating in your game, of course, but it's fun to see people like that get caught.
It was
Don't get that in Arena Magic.
that kind of press is important as well, is what you're saying.
Yes. And just the human aspect of it, of just high pressure situations, cause you to mess up your play patterns. Meanwhile, in Arena, you literally is just click, 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 click. There's no pressure there, honestly.
And now, Prince, I presume you also are on the other side of this, where you think you did say that Arena is the future, and that's where
It absolutely is the future.
that's true. That's where the money is. What do you personally wish you could get out of Magic right now?
So I guess I can look at it from two different ways, because it's true that when Arena came out, especially when they had at first announced Historic, I had declared that there was no reason for me to ever play Paper Magic again, which I was actually very happy about, because I'm just so tired of being subjected to the secondary market. It's just not something that we should have to deal with just to play a game. And I thought Arena got rid of that problem and was just the saving grace that we needed in the game. And I understood back then that Commander, which was one of my formats, was not going to exist on Arena in a digital version in a way that actually appealed to Commander players. In terms of 1v1 Magic, yeah, I mean, I agree with all the positives you guys have outlined. It's it solves a lot of problems. I actually kind of like that you don't get to lose because of something that doesn't have to do with you. I do get that that's also part of a card game. Yeah, that's true. I guess I hadn't really thought about that. But for me, it's a little bit more reassuring that if I lose, it's going to be because I wasn't able to. Oh, I mean, either the luck wasn't on my side or I made some strategic mistake. It's not because I made some mistake that outside of the game itself, like a missed trigger or something like that.
And I feel like that's like a lot of ways Paper Magic is like poker, where applying pressure to your opponent mentally can cause them to make those mistakes and thus ensure you win. I feel like that's a big part of the game, an important part of the game. We lose with Arena and Magic together online.
There are aspects that I definitely won't see again in arena tournaments that I have in Paper Magic. Like one example I can think of is during one paper tournament where I was playing against an opponent who sat across from me, who had a notepad with a bunch of card names written on that notepad in separate groups, like 5 or 6 or 7 names of cards, just like telling that he had been Thoughtsseizing this opponent and remembering what cards were in their hand, right? And so he failed to recognize that that was information that he was giving out. So I just kind of mulliganed down to a hand that was good against mid range and won the game. I don't know if it was because of that. I might have just, for all I know, won without that. That's definitely something you wouldn't see on Arena. But it's something that I would still give up. It's more of a positive for me to not lose to those scenarios than to win with them.
I see where you're coming from. I can understand that perfectly.
Now, you brought up the secondary market, which leads me into another thing I wanted to touch on today, and that is proxies. So we all three play cEDH, and we all three use proxies for cards we don't own to play cEDH. And not just cEDH sometimes. I know Kill and I have gone down to the game store and played lower power, but with proxies, and it's generally accepted. I haven't ran into very many people who are strongly against them or are willing to speak out against them at a table. And so I want to make the argument that proxies are healthy for Paper Magic, that they don't harm the game at all, especially now that Arena is the focus of the company making the cards.
Oh, absolutely. They don't. So officially, Wizards does not, I believe, still denies the secondary market exists. And even if they did, accept that. If you're proxying like an underground river, you most likely never had an intention to buy that in the first place because you don't want to drop $2,300 on a well-played card.
Oh, I think you mean Underground Sea.
Underground Sea, yeah. Underground River's the one that does 1 damage. I always get that mixed up. But I used to have a rule where I wouldn't proxy cards I do not own, but I've been breaking that recently because I'm simply not going to drop $4,000 for a Tabernacle Pendant Veil when I'm just going to play it in some fun jank Sisei Shrines list. So I am not hurting the market at all because I 100% will never buy that card. And people seeing that card, a lot of people don't even know that card exists. And in a way, me playing that card tells them it exists. And, at our store, we play with a lot of wealthy people, and those people will probably go out and buy that card because they just have that money. But I do not have that money, and I'm not willing to spend that money. And proxying in general gets people who simply cannot afford to play even a casual format of Commander, even at a low level. It allows them to get their foot in the door and actually play the game. Because currently, just the price of staples is high all across the board. Budget decks that used to be $50 10 years ago have ballooned to $250 decks. There used to be this Macias $25 deck that could win, and it was pretty fun and strong. That deck now is, I think, sitting around $300 because the prices of every card has ballooned. And if anything, proxying helps get those targeted demographics Wizards is desperate to court into the game, because a lot of those demographics aren't willing to spend $3,000 on just random decks.
Yeah, and I think that even though the issue of proxy shouldn't be connected to Wizards at all, because I'm sure as soon as Wizards says, okay, you can use proxies but not in tournaments, they're going to be like, but only our official proxies. But separating it from the company itself, using proxies does make it easier for people to get into games, specifically of Commander and high-powered Commander, where they want to play with really cool, powerful stuff that maybe they found in a search engine, but they're like, why is this card $300? I really wish I could play with this. And then content creators going so far, like I know the nitpicking nerds claimed that Tabernacle on their list of cards that are worth it or not worth it to play, they said, this card's great, I wish I could play it, but it's too expensive to obtain, and so you should not play it. And so, because I think the consensus is generally thought to be that proxies are a taboo among casual play.
Well, I would say I'm assuming those guys are YouTubers. I would assume any YouTuber would openly be against proxies just because they want Papa Wizards to give them handouts.
And that's weird because that only applies to people outside of cEDH. cEDH is that one exception where the content creators don't care at all about Wizards. Playing with Power, the Spike Feeders, Play to Win, Into the North, all of those outlets for influential people with competitive Commander have all stated that proxies are allowed. In all the online cEDH tournaments, proxies are allowed. In their leagues, proxies are allowed. The Mox Bowl allow proxies. Major League Commander drafts entire decks full of proxies. Tier 1 Con used playtest cards for the most expensive cards in the format as a way of allowing proxies to make it more accessible. And I don't see that. I love that. All the players love that. I don't see that encouraged anywhere else.
Yeah, it is. It should definitely be encouraged by our benevolent YouTubers. But again, they're not going to openly really encourage that because it's not a good look. I feel like though the player base in general is fine with proxies, you do have these weird holdouts that are. Sarah and I have ran into individuals who are like, "Don't you think that's cheating?" And the idea that is like, well, perhaps you were just born into a wealthy family, man. Don't you think that's cheating? Because you create this divide of players who can afford to play decent cards or good cards, and players who can't, and those players will more consistently lose. Even things like dual lands and shock lands, those increase consistency, and consistency directly increases fun, in my opinion. So if you're going to deny people playing with consistent decks just because they can't afford it, you're just hurting the format in general, because those people are not going to want to play, because they'll be like, oh, man, that's a nice Taiga there. I wish I could run that in my 12-year deck. This guy will get mad if I proxy it, so I got to play this shitty tap land that gives me one life.
Yeah, and let me isolate an example, because not every casual player wants to play the best mana base, but doesn't every casual player who plays white want to put Smothering Tithe in their deck? The card's
Oh,
over
absolutely.
$30. And
Oh, yes.
only now in my life am I barely able to afford a card that's $30 every now and then. Not every time one gets released and hyped up and the price spikes. Cards like Smothering Tithe, cards like just Craterhoof Behemoth.
Creative Hoof Behemoth, yeah, and I don't even see Creative Hoof Behemoth that often anymore, and I looked at his price recently, and I am aware why.
Yeah, it's $50. Cyclonic Rift. The card that media will not stop talking about will not go below $26.
Yeah.
If you're telling every blue player they need to play this card and it's this expensive, you're creating a barrier to entry to this format.
Yes, and as I said, it just becomes about who has more money.
Yeah, I know several players with really deep collections, but no intention on playing their cards competitively, and I feel out of place because I am all about being competitive and maximizing things, and so I've always had to use proxies because I just can't afford to keep testing things out or like building up new decks with my own money because I need to get a life. It's more about survival, and I want to play this game as a game, not necessarily play it as a career. Maybe cover
Yeah,
it, talk
you
about it
don't-
as a career.
You're not trying to invest, and I feel like a lot of players are of the same mindset. They're not trying to invest; they just want to play with fun cards. And like a lot of times, your fun cards are strong cards, such as like Mana Crypt and Mana Vault. But like, I'm not gonna mind if people proxy those, especially if they're proxying them because they want to play like a big dumb dinosaur.
Or like a crazy 5-color Child of Alara deck with all the lands in it.
Yeah, I feel like proxies in general benefit casual players the most because a lot of your entrenched like cEDH players do actually own a lot of the cards they have, like a lot of the powerful cards. Hence why they want to play in cEDH. I feel like.
Yeah, I can build a non-proxy cEDH deck
Yeah.
because I finally obtained a Savannah.
You just won't be able to build like 3 of them because you
Yeah.
have to swap all those cards out. But yeah, proxying, I don't see how proxying hurts the game at all or the market at all because, as I said, if you're proxying a $3,000 card, you have no intention of buying that card.
Mm-hmm. Prince, what are your thoughts on like the effect of proxies on like a community such as Commander?
Well, it all depends on where they're being utilized. In Commander, I guess the negative effects would be people go to their local game stores to play Commander. A lot of times that's where they learn about some cards that should be in their deck. And if we allow all proxies, there's no reason to just buy singles at your local game store, meaning the outlets that supply Wizards stocks do less well. So I could see that being a reason why Wizards would not want to legalize proxies. Same with competitive formats, I guess. If they're ever allowed in sanctioned tournaments, why would you ever buy the paper product? I know I wouldn't.
Well, that's an interesting point you make, but so singles, they support the game store, yes, and the game store supports Wizards, but a lot of players will go to your local game store on release day and buy boxes and boxes. Cards will still be bought even if people are proxying out with Tigers, your other 1Cs, and your Mana Crypts. I don't think proxying will hurt the local game stores in general, because as I said before, if you're proxying that card, you probably weren't going to buy it in the first place.
I think the thing that ties those two things together are tournaments. If you want to play in a tournament or in a tournament setting, it's best to have the real cards with you. And Commander is a unique thing where it's talked about as kitchen table magic, and so the local game store and the company who makes the cards, they don't have a say in it anyway, so why should they care about proxies?
The Commander format is not truly affiliated. It's not a sanctioned format in general. So the rules committee, if they wanted to, could they themselves just be like, oh, proxies are fine. But the rules committee also has a relationship with Wizards, so they will never actually do that because they enjoy their kickbacks. But if the rules committee really truly desired to, they could simply say, It's a casual format. Proxies are fine. It's supposed to be accessible.
Oh wow, looks like Kokusho's back over $20.
Nice. Thanks, investors. It was reprinted a couple of times, I believe, as well.
Yeah, it was printed in Iconic Masters at Rare. Yeah, so in general, we're pro proxy because cEDH kind of necessitates it. And
Proxy and anti-counterfeit.
yes, counterfeits is a different story.
The recent debacle of people panicking. Meanwhile, the official Reddit for counterfeit cards are still smooth sailing.
Yeah, so this company called MPC, or Make Playing Cards, exists. It's run out of Asia, and what you can do is you can send them images that typically people want to order decks of playing cards from them, like standard deck of playing cards, with custom backs, different text on the front. You can customize anything you want with that site. You can order things like double-sided cards on cardstock pretty easily for a good price. And so it's become popular to order high-quality MTG proxies from them because you can get the same cardstock in the same size. Well, not the same cardstock, but you can get like playing cardstock in the same size as a Magic card, which proves to be a really good proxy, especially because you can use high-quality artwork. And so there was this little community that they ran a server for both official and altar artworks for most of the cards in the game, so that people could go and proxy a lot of cards without having to bring their own images and do the troublesome formatting task themselves. And recently, one proxy creator on Twitter put a loud post out just claiming that they were infringing on copyright by ordering those proxies. And immediately this controversy erupts for a couple days about it, and the site's taken down. So
it's taken down, the artists for various alternate art cards delete all the archives of art, and numerous people begin panicking over nothing.
yeah, it was a whole thing, and I was just trying to proxy some new cards from Midnight Hunt, and the site went down, so I can't do it anymore, which is kind of sad on my part, but like boohoo, woe to me, but more woe to Wizards for their intellectual property being abused in this way. But it's not. A lot of the people who were getting mad about it do not understand copyright law.
Nor do they understand that nothing will actually happen because the company's located in Hong Kong. Hong Kong famously not caring about IP laws in general. The entire ordeal was just some silly nonsense. I don't quite understand why the content creators, the proxy guy was his name, decided to blow the whistle at all. He himself makes unofficial playtest cards. And I'm not even sure what Wizards of the Coast proxy policy is. I'm looking at it now and it says they have no intention of policing playtest cards.
I think that's the official term for proxies.
Yeah.
I see it as a term to differentiate between testing and tournament play.
Yeah.
Oh, no one intends to use the proxies they were making from NPC in tournament play. For that, you go to the official counterfeit Magic the Gathering Reddit.
Yeah, that exists, and there are sites that sell convincing counterfeits of Magic cards, and they keep trying to develop better and better ones, and no one's talking about that.
No one's talking about that. That is, and it seems like they know what they're doing, so they probably would not care if you talk about that.
Yeah, I don't think they would.
They have entire guides on how to make cards look convincing, such as like running them through the dryer or leaving them out in the sun. You have buyers and resellers of counterfeit cards. It's actually very impressive. I was unaware that this existed until this entire thing, and I just got linked to the MTG bootleg Reddit.
Yeah, I was a tiny victim of one of them the other day. Realized that the Glacial Chasm from Ice Age that I've been carrying around for a couple years was a counterfeit when I tried to sell it to a store, and they realized it wasn't quite the right size.
Oh, I've like had a counterfeit card before. At Emerald Dragon, I was trying to sell cards before, and I had an expiration in a group of cards I was selling, and the expiration was counterfeit. And I had bought that expiration from a place called Suncoast Comics like a decade ago. Suncoast Comics now being FLGS, I believe.
Yeah, so they are in circulation, which
They're
is
definitely in
interesting.
circulation, especially since a lot of people don't know how to check. I've learned how to check now. You do a red dot test, you take a loop, and you look at the back of it. There's plenty of videos on how to check. But yes, it's a counterfeit market exists, and the cards are convincing enough to where when you just look at them, you're not going to be able to tell. And no one's going to allow you to take their cards out of a pack. And you know what? As long as they're not trying to sell it, to me, I'm not going to want to be taking their card. If I see like a suspicious looking like Underground Sea across the table from me, I'm not going to be like, hey man, let me see that card. No, I'll just be like, oh, that's a proxy, and be fine with it. But as long as they're not trying to sell people cards, and the issue is like, well, obviously they're in circulation and being sold.
Yeah, and that's arguably much bigger issue than proxies.
Definitely. And hey, proxy guy, why don't you bring some light on that? Why don't you, get your thousands of viewers to go over there and talk to those people?
Yeah, maybe you should ping them on Twitter.
I don't want to be that guy though.
Okay.
Probably Wizards of the Coast is most likely aware of the MTG bootleg Reddit and just simply can't do anything.
Yeah.
I assume a multi-billion-dollar corporation is aware of a dedicated board on one of the most popular websites on the internet.
I don't know. Sometimes they aren't even aware of the needs of their own populace. But, you know. Now, speaking of Wizards, another thing we wanted to talk about is how Magic the Gathering in paper is becoming a true collectible where investors invest and collectors collect, and it's harder and harder to play.
Oh, absolutely. As soon as someone gets whiff of something being released, suddenly every card related to that is tripled in price. The prime example currently being werewolves and vampires, as people race to the top to buy all those up because they want to resell at 4 times as much. There's just a random uncommon werewolf that shot up for $30. I think I have it here in front of me. Actually, there's like 5 werewolves in front of me right now, so I don't want to list which one it would have been. But yes, it is the game, in part to YouTube players, I guess, is becoming more and more. Paper Magic is just seen as an investment now. You buy boxes, you sit on boxes, you open cards, you sleeve them, and you never sell them. And it really hurts the casual players and the competitive players who just want to buy Magic cards and play them.
Yeah, and now even investors getting advance notice of which cards, they have inroads that no average person is capable of handling, where they'll know when a trend is about to happen and they act at the beginning of it before any normal player can obtain a card. It's already gone up in price significantly.
Absolutely, and there have been numerous things in the past where bans have happened, but suspiciously someone sold their entire stock of X card.
Yeah, things like that are harmful to the community, and it's a big issue of dishonesty and greed from people who see this game as nothing more than money.
Yeah, and ultimately, I believe like this hurts the investor thing hurts the game more than proxying ever would, because you have more players out there who would actually like to own like random $10 cards, such as Nexus of Fate. Although I believe Nexus of Fate is up to like $25, $30 now. But you have players out there who would like to own that and not have to proxy it. But people who have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting around and think this is some kind of investment game are sitting on top of them, and they just they can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the example being werewolves, with all the werewolves just shooting way up in price overnight. On the MTV Finance subreddit, I believe they even created a bot that crawls eBay and alerts people to cards that are being sold for undervalue, so people can swoop in and put a bid on those cards.
I used to listen to an MTG Finance podcast, and there's a paid subscription program that gives you software that's even more advanced than that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so if you're an investor, you can, for a small price to pay, get the advance on all of the trends.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that exists. I'm sure you're happy to know.
I mean, it is nice to know that a card I bought a foil Zakama, I believe. Like, at least I think I bought it. I may have put it in the pack. But anyway, I got it at a point when it was like $25, and now she's sitting at like $99. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But it also is like, I'm never going to play that card again, and there are people out there who just want to do a big, dumb, stompy dinosaur, and it really sucks that they would have to drop $90 to get a foil fancy version of the big dino. And the only thing that nothing can really be done about it, that I know of. I don't think Wizards can actually crack down on the secondary market. I believe Digimon, Konami had a method they did with. Do you have any opinions on this, Prince? Are you aware of anything?
Honestly, no. I'm pretty unaware of the financial world as far as Magic goes, but I do know that, I mean, whole investing, buying out certain products just kind of happens in the world, not even just the gaming world. Once you get big, that's the unfortunate reality, is that you're going to attract the people looking for money.
Looking to turn their money into more money.
For sure.
Which, I mean, fair play. But it gets to a point where it's a little unfair when it's a game we're talking about, with pieces that are themselves worth money. That's the unique challenge of trading card games.
Actually, I just realized, Yu-Gi-Oh! Unironically has managed to do this price control method, which is where they simply reprint everything into the dirt. Which, that's a way to do it, and I could see how some people would have a problem with that, but I honestly would not have a problem with just reprinting every card that is moderately popular into the dirt. I'm pretty sure Yu-Gi-Oh! Just releases tins that have cards that were like meta cards like a year after they rotate out.
Yeah, and you know who else does
Something
that?
very similar not too many years ago. It's something that I was just really hoping that Magic and Pokemon would start doing too. It's just, oh, these cards are really expensive. We're just going to reprint them directly. Like, not as part of a set. It's like, here, you can buy this directly from us.
I'm confident that is exactly what Yu-Gi-Oh! Does. It's just like, oh, these cards are strong and powerful and popular. Here's a big tin box that has all of them. And Magic was, in my opinion, heading in the right direction with the alternate art, with the chase arts and the full art borders. I was hoping they would go the direction where Pokemon kind of does it in the same way, where you have like, I don't know, like Misty, and then you have like Rainbow Foil Misty, and that's the expensive one. That's your money card that people want.
And then you have the entirely gold foil Misty, which is even more.
Yes. But you can always play with the normal one, which I feel like is the best method. But it doesn't seem like Magic has followed suit, which I thought they were starting to do, because as you see, both Vagabonds are sitting around $80.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. They were starting to look like they had the option to go this way.
Yeah, like with Battle for Zendikar and the real expeditions, they tanked the prices of all the cards in that set because there were chase rares that people could invest in, and then the rest of the cards were cheap for the players.
And that was the way to go. They were doing it good. And then Ragavan happened.
Yeah, and I think Magic has the mistake of making their mythics too rare. If you take Pokemon, for example, which Prince and I both used to play competitively, I can open a single booster box, still 36 packs of a set, and pull 4 copies of one of the ultra rares that I was looking for. Whereas in Magic, I might not even get one.
Yeah, and you're going to need at least 3 for a constructed deck. Yeah, it's strange. What happened in between the fetches being reprinted into dirt, which is only good, and ironically something people have been asking for a decade, and now?
Yeah, I think maybe it's some choice, like decision memory, because back at the beginning of the game, when rares were really expensive and people were trading their cards and building up their collections for the first time. Nothing like this had ever been done before. Magic was the first trading card game. As soon as Magic released a reprint set, the card's prices tanked, and then all the players with collections got angry at the company because they felt like they had been robbed, like their money had been taken from them, because to them it wasn't just a game, it was a collectible game. And I think the decision memory of that decision to create the reserved list endures to this day, where they never want to make a card that's good too common.
Well, that's interesting because they simply need to move past that. That was an age before the internet and before people could widely. I believe if the internet had existed back then, it would have been a different story because they reprinted it into the dirt, but it was only really available in a few major cities. I think the internet would have changed things back then. And you can just look at the examples of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is still going strong. Right now, Yu-Gi-Oh!'s problem is power creep. Digimon is doing well. And Konami, I believe, actually does have a policy where they're like, stores are not allowed to scalp or we won't sell your product. Other card games were going strong, and they had decent reprint policies, such as the Transformers TCG. A lot of the expensive card, that game is dead by the way, but due to COVID. A lot of the cards in that set were expensive, but they were unnecessary for high-level competitive play. So I think we're at the point in time where they can easily just be like, here's an actual starter deck that comes with Goldspan Dragon right now. All different versions of Goldspan Dragon are sitting around $50. Here's a starter deck that comes with one. And they've done that in the past with cards like Arc Like Phoenix, wherein I think a Challenger deck?
Yeah, the Challenger decks, that was great. They should have kept with those. But now they don't need them because they only care about Arena.
So Challenger decks on Arena. But yes, they just need to follow the Yu-Gi-Oh! Reprint policy and just print that shit into the dirt so everyone can play with it.
And if they want their game to be collectible, sure, keep the reserve list, but reprint the new cards, please, like Pokemon does. If you want to play competitive Pokemon, you don't need that much of a money investment, whereas, the Charizards of the world are still going to be really expensive, especially now.
Yeah, and they could just, as I said, follow the Pokemon method, is where here's here's your Ragavan, and then here's Rainbow Reverse Foil Hollow Ragavan.
Yeah, exactly. For the collectors. Get this super awesome rare one, and if a player wants to play with it, sure, but they can just play with the normal one too.
Which is an excellent method. It does bother me though, because I'm always the type of guy, Sarah and I both are like, we have to have the most premium version of the card, but...
Yeah, I mean, wherein in Magic, it's hilarious. Sometimes the premium version of a card is less expensive than the original.
Yeah.
Because they just don't make them significantly different in rarity.
That and the premium version, for instance, Goldspan Dragon, it's just borderless. That's it. If you're going to do a fancy version of the card, it needs to have different art. It needs to actually be unique to make people want to run out and get it.
Yeah, one thing I miss from Pokemon is just how cool their cards were, how high quality they were. Like, they had texture, many, many more colors than you see on a Magic card. Very intense decisions towards their, bordering and everything. And it was just really cool to see. But now I'm stuck with, I want the art, or I want the extended art, or, in very rare cases, maybe there's a different printing.
Yeah, or here's one that has a stamp on it. Oh, cool, a stamp.
Oh boy, it's in foil. It's really hard to tell that it's in foil.
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
And it's a taco. Prince knows this. Prince never plays with foils. Ever.
Yeah, that's understandable. They're very hit or miss.
The only foils I use are for commander cards, specifically the commander of a deck.
Well, your commanders are only foil, so...
Really?
Well, no, I mean, the partners, the original partners, they're only printed in foil.
They were even reprinted, and they weren't non-foil?
They weren't non-foil because they were only part of that special etched foil set. They weren't actually in the Commander Legends set.
Check that out.
Yeah, so you can only get a Taco Temna or a etched Taco Temna.
Fantastic. Or sometimes the foiling will be so dark you just can't even see what the art is.
And I mean, I kind of like that aesthetic. Remember
Oh god, there was
that
the
time?
Reshiram and Zekrons from Pokemon.
Yes.
Is that what they were?
Yep. All of those were awesome. So the Reshiram and Zekrom, they're the face of Black and White version, the 5th generation Pokemon games. For those uneducated, Reshiram is the white dragon with blue flames, and Zekrom is the black dragon with lightning. And they printed special edition versions of their card. Again, the normal versions were cents, but these were really valuable and they're really cool. The Reshiram was all white with some like silver accents, and the Zekrom was all black with some like gray accents, and it was really cool.
And those were even easier to see than
Yeah,
the folding,
they were
fold etched ones.
incredibly legible.
We're talking about deck prices. I'm looking at Pokemon TCG meta prices for meta decks at the moment, and they're all under $200. That is amazing.
They've always been that way. Like the
Go to a tournament. I can just go to a shop, spend $90, and have a tournament-worthy deck. That is amazing. I'm going to start playing Pokemon.
Yeah, I'm considering going back to it because like Prince and I, we played both games for a little bit, and after we went to the national championships in Columbus, Ohio in 2016, we were both on Garchomp. We decided to just continue playing Magic, and I ended up giving away all of my Pokemon cards. I regret that decision now because at the time it was a good decision because we were tired of rotation because they didn't have an eternal format, or at least it hadn't emerged yet in Pokemon TCG. But Magic, we could play Modern, we could play Commander. But now the economy is pushing me away in a small way, like every day. That makes me kind of want to go back to when the cards were pretty and less expensive.
Yeah, so, the number one thing hurting Magic the Gathering, even though they keep saying they're growing hand over fist every year, and I'm pretty sure they have the numbers to back it up, I believe if all the formats were more accessible, as in price-wise, shit was just cheaper, they would see even greater growth.
I think so too.
I've talked to so many people who just don't play Magic. They like it. It's a cool game. They'll play if someone gives them a deck, but they don't play on any level because they just don't want to have to drop $300 every rotation to get new cards, or drop upwards of $800 for a Modern deck. And that's the thing. People say you can play with like a cheap Modern deck, like Red Deck Wins. It's a deck that's like under $200, but you'll get tired of playing that. You'll be like, I want to build another deck, but then you'll see like the price of Tron or the price of Prowess or the price of Affinity, and you're like, oh man, damn. I think currently Hammer Time is a cheaper deck, and I even think that's like sitting at $200.
Yeah, and a crazy story, at that same national championships in Pokemon, I could trade my non-meta, my anti-meta Garchomp deck. I could trade the cards from that, and I built a fully functional meta deck at the tournament just by trading with people.
Did I say Hammer Time is a $200 deck? I'm sorry. It was actually a $1,000 deck.
Yeah.
That sounds more reasonable.
There's your barrier. This is why certain demographics you want to play Modern Wizards are not playing Modern, because they famously cannot afford to play a $1,000 deck.
I don't know if I would put the words want and wizards in the same sentence anymore. I think they only care about Arena.
Yeah, that does seem. Yeah.
That's a big reason why they're neglecting the finance aspect of their game, and they're not doing anything to bring new players with less cash into it.
What were they doing before Arena, though?
What they were doing before Arena was, actually, I don't know if they've ever been good about it. I think it's kind of been exclusive all the time. It was standard. You could play standard for cheap most of the time if you wanted to play a non-meta deck. Or like there was like the 3 decks that all of them were like $100. But if you wanted to play a standard deck that wasn't really expensive, yeah, you could do it. But now standard doesn't exist in paper. It's all Arena. So like there's no incentive for new players to pick up real cards. It's just for them to log into Arena.
Which means people can just invest in paper cards now, which makes more people go towards Arena. You're playing next level game there, Wizards.
Yep.
I don't think the investments would work if just no one is playing paper Magic, though.
Well, that's the thing. That's always been the conundrum. So you have a $250,000 Black Lotus, like 0.0001% of the population, can afford that, and who's going to buy it? Who's going to buy your 500 foil Stoneforge Mystics?
Yeah, there's not. Well,
Well, I think the idea that someone would buy it is separate from the idea of a true collectible, which is what Magic is becoming in paper. Think about old video games and old video game consoles. People don't actively go and buy them off of collectors, but collectors hold them and they have a price based on what other collectors value them as, not necessarily on any like demographic who's deciding how valued they are. It's a strict collectible at this point.
Oh, okay. So you're saying they don't really have any intention of trying to offload those cards at like 5 times what they paid for them?
They don't.
Okay.
Because investing makes money without needing to sell the things you're investing in.
That is true, yes. I'm just reminded of the individual TCG player who had 2,500 arcane signets before the reprint. So I'm wondering what happened to him.
Yeah, and what happened to him? Well, let us know in the comments what happened to that guy. I think we need to wind down here. This is a great discussion of a lot of diverse topics. We'll have, oh boy, I have a doozy of a thumbnail on this one. I will talk to you guys later. Thank you for joining me, Kill and Prince.
Yes, sir. Both of you have a good night.
Alrighty. Bye.